Hey guys, Scott here. Today I want to talk about a little patch note that has been very overlooked due to a multitude of other more pressing or interesting or, captivating things that happened in the most recent patch, but I feel like it is genuinely making my time as killer significantly worse, and I think it needs to get more attention because we are being distracted by the anti-tunnel and slug changes that did get scrapped, but people are talking about that. Krassu is insanely strong, so people are focused on that. But there was this patch note during the Krassu PTB that I was really concerned about, and I talked about that in a video. And yeah, I'm still concerned about it because it's now actively happening in live servers. But they had a quality of life patch in order to remove dead zones from maps. Dead zones are areas that don't have any resources, pallets, or windows. It's just nothing. The killer just downs you because you just don't have anything. So that is what the patch notes said that they were doing. First of all, that's not quality of life. Quality of life is when you're slugged, you auto-recover on the ground. That's quality of life. This is just buffing Survivor. It's just, you're just adding more pallets to maps. So I don't know why they worded it as quality of life, because it just simply isn't. But this is, I think, a huge problem because, like I said, people are distracted by a lot of other things right now. A lot of people are playing Krassu, and if they made the game a lot harder for killer and you're playing Krassu, well, likely you're just not even going to notice because you're just flying around a Mach 10, just whipping around loops, killing people. So it doesn't really matter for people playing that. But I tried playing Myers and like weaker killers for a while, and holy shit, it is a lot harder to win now. They kind of ruined a lot of maps that used to be, honestly, my favorite. Coal Tower is a perfect example. Coal Tower used to be my favorite map in the entire game. It's the map I would do 1v1s on. It was just, in my opinion, like the pinnacle of a really well-designed map. It was really good. Sometimes it could be a little killer-sided. Sometimes it could be a little survivor-sided. But for the most part, it was a well-balanced map. Now, they have just added a fuck ton more pallets to it for seemingly no reason. And I'll get into the real problem with this whole issue here first, but I actually just went through, like, I spent an hour and just, like, walked through every single realm in this list. And on average, there's, like, 20 pallets per map right now, which on, like, the absolute biggest maps in the game, like Shelter Woods, for example, that's usually, like, on the upper end of, okay, that's a lot, but it's playable, it's fine. The problem is even tiny maps like Coal Tower and Wrecker's Yard now also have 20 pallets on them. So it's not congruent to the size of the map. Again, if they're much bigger, they can be more dispersed and it's not so crazy. But on Coal Tower, we're getting setups where there's like 3 rock loops like 2 feet away from each other because the map is so small. They have to cram so many pallets into that area that it's making it just so bad. Now, the worst part about all of this is that it's just not even accurate. It's not even true what they're saying here. It was meant to remove dead zones, and don't get me wrong, I actually don't think that's a terrible idea. As a personal aside, I don't really mind the idea of dead zones as killer or survivor too much because I feel like it's sort of an interesting macro decision you have to make when you spawn in as a survivor, because you'll spawn in, see, oh, there's just a hill and some nothing here, but there's a gen here. So you kind of have to like prioritize the generators that are in dead zones first because it's less likely the killer will find you at this early stage of the game. It's less likely they'll patrol to that gen because there's so many to patrol. So you kind of have to like make a macro decision of, okay, let's get these dead zone gens first, and then we'll have the remaining generators be much stronger with really strong tiles next to them. So it's going to be a lot harder for the killer to pressure. So I've always kind of enjoyed that little like mini macro game you have to make, and killers are kind of trying to do the opposite. They're trying to take chases to that dead zone, and they're zoning people in such a way. Like, I don't know, I find that stuff kind of interesting. I'm not saying it feels great as a survivor to just run around and there's just nothing for 20 meters. That feels like shit. But my whole point is I actually don't think the idea of having a dead zone or 2 per map is really a terrible idea at all. I think that's fine as long as there's like only 1 or 2, you know what I mean? So those are my thoughts on dead zones. But the whole thing is I don't inherently mind the idea of dispersing pallets kind of everywhere. So instead of 3 right here, and there's an insanely busted setup with a window chained together to like 2 other tiles right here, instead of that, maybe now there's, instead of 3 pallets here, now there's 2 here, but now you've added 1 into like a corner that normally would just have nothing. I think that's okay. I think that's perfectly fine. A lot of the time, these pallets on corners are not very good. You might be able to get a stun and get away with that, but it's kind of like a very, very last-ditch effort type of pallet. And I'm totally okay with like shifting stuff around to make it so those areas that previously had nothing do have a little bit of something. It's better than nothing, right? I think that's completely fine. But like I said, the problem here is they didn't do that. They just added more pallets everywhere. And the worst part is there are still dead zones too. This is, I think, the thing that annoys me the most about this. Here's a perfect example. I went to Blood Lodge, which is a very survivor-sided map, which they've just buffed, by the way. There's just more pallets now. But let me show you a perfect example of why this is so stupid. So the whole point of this is to remove dead zones, right? That was the whole point. Quality of life, remove dead zones, so there's less, areas where there's nothing to work with. Okay, here is a giant dead zone on Blood Lodge. I haven't kicked any pallets. I just spawned in here. Massive dead zone. There is nothing for a 30-meter stretch of straight line here. Absolutely nothing to use. And that's bad. So clearly they didn't fix that issue. However, what they've done is, like I said, they just added a shit ton more pallets, though. They didn't fix the dead zone issue, but now look at the shack. Now there are 4 filler pallets around the shack. So shack, already one of the strongest tiles in the entire game, is now infinitely stronger to the point where, like, I don't even want to chase somebody as an M1 killer at shack now, because even if I play shack correctly, they don't even have to worry about dropping the pallet yet, because there's another one 2 feet away that they can play around and then loop back into shack and keep doing this 3 or 4 times. So this is a perfect example of why this patch note is just bullshit. They didn't remove dead zones. They just made certain other setups even more busted. And so as long as survivors don't go to the dead zones that already existed, so it's not like it's a buff to killer, there were still dead zones on certain maps. So killer didn't get any stronger. All we did was just make busted setups even more busted, which is just fucking what? Imagine if this shipped with the anti-tunnel and anti-slug changes on top of that. Holy shit, no one would be winning with anyone but like the top tier killers. It'd be miserable. So it feels really, really bad right now. And the thing is, there aren't even like concessions. The only realm that has a little bit of a concession here, I will admit, is McMillan. Because what they did is add a shit ton more pallets, but they made a particular rock loop a bit weaker. There used to be a rock loop called a God loop, or God rock rather. But most people didn't know how to play it as a God Rock. It was basically only like comp players and the very best that knew how to make it very safe. But for the most part, it was a very, very safe pallet. Unlikely you'd have to kick it. But there would be maybe like 2 or maybe 3 of them on like Coal Tower, for example. The thing is, though, now there's like 6 or 7 of those rock loops that are a bit weaker. It's not like a you must break this pallet anymore, but it's also not exactly a weak loop either. So basically, the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want 2 God pallets you kick and now the area is dead for the rest of the game? Or do you want 6 or 7 a bit weaker pallets, but you might spend 15 seconds getting hit at it, and then the pallet's still up, actually, so someone else can get 15 seconds at it later. Basically, like, it's just which do you prefer? I'm not even saying this is like a wrong or right thing here. I'm just saying I would prefer the 2 God pallets, because then I can just kick them. Yeah, I probably lose too much distance in that chase for it to be viable to continue chasing that person, but now that area is dead for the rest of the game. Whereas with these unsafe pallets, if you hit a survivor there, you're likely not kicking the pallet, which means it exists for future survivors to continue to use, and you still probably have to spend 10-15 seconds getting a hit at that pallet. That adds up over time because that resource is not consumed, and I think overall that makes killer weaker. Now, obviously, there is, there's the other side where we have maps like The Game, which is just only God pallets, and that's equally, I would say The Game is the most boring map in the entire game. There's just nothing but God pallets on it. Survivors and killers both play it in the exact same way. You walk to a pallet, you drop it, killer kicks it, and you move on to the next room where they're going to do the same thing, and you hope that once the pallets are gone, as killer, you hope you've won by then, because if not, then you're just fucked, and that's it. But then the survivors also have nothing because there's no windows or anything to work with, so you're just terrible, terrible map. That's going in the opposite direction, and that's equally terrible. In fact, I would say even more terrible. But the whole point is, this quality of life patch was meant to remove dead zones from certain areas, and you would think they would do that by dispersing pallets from the middle outwards. And I can see they've done that in some scenarios because there are now pallets like on the outskirts of maps. Even if they're not very good, they do exist. But they didn't really take away anything else. All they did was just make strong setups even stronger. And I think that just was a giant misstep. Like I said, Coal Tower used to be my favorite map in the entire game. And it feels so bad now. It feels so difficult to win on killers that are not, the absolute best in the entire game. So it is just really, really bad what they did here. So I'm just really upset with this change, and I kind of want more people to complain about it because it's just terrible. For those watching the B-roll here, I've noticed I had a whole thing where for some reason I decided I was never going to kick this pallet, and I spent about 23 minutes trying to down a survivor here with a generator, or with a pallet there. Don't make fun of me. Anyway, I'm tangenting now. Okay, that's it. Bye.